right. Good evening. Welcome to the June 3rd, 2025 regular meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission. We are going to call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. Okay. Item 2, roll call. Can the recording secretary please conduct our roll call?
Commissioner Alpert,
Here.
Commissioner Avila, Commissioner Wallace,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Curtis, Chair Kuznick.
I'm here. Okay, item 3, Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Item number 4, public comments or written communications. At this time, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any item not already included in tonight's agenda. If you would like to speak, please fill out a speaker card located in the back of the room and submit it to our recording secretary. We will not be taking any public comment via Zoom. Do we have any written public comment or any cards on items not on the agenda?
I do not have any.
Okay, so we will close that portion of the public comment. Item number 5, additions and revisions. Are there any additions or revisions? Gentlemen, staff? Seeing none, we will move on to item 6, which is the consent calendar. We have the consent calendar, which includes 6.1 minutes of the Planning Commission regular meeting, May 6th, 2025.
I will move to accept the minutes of the May 6th Planning Commission meeting as written.
I'll second.
Right. So we have a motion and a second, and let us vote. Okay, so the motion does pass 3-002 on the consent calendar. Thank you. Okay, item next, which is 7. Continued items after the close of the public hearing. There are none. Item 8, continued items, open the public hearing. There are continued items, pardon me. Open the public hearing, there are none. And so we move to item 9, public hearing, new items. Item 9.1, Camino Ramon Apartments Residential Development.
Thank you very much and good evening. It is my pleasure this evening to provide a PowerPoint presentation just briefly on the Camino Ramon Apartments Residential Development. Just getting my presentation going here. Okay. Okay, so application for development plan, architecture review, tree removal, and environmental review application at 2453 Camino Ramon. The project is located between Norris Canyon and Executive Parkway on Camino Ramon. It's about 2.2 acre site in the downtown mixed-use north general plan designation and zoning district. The application was filed in September of last year for a preliminary housing development application. The formal development application was subsequently filed January of this year. And in February, the Planning Commission held a study session before formally reviewing completeness for the application. And on March 13th, the Architecture Review Board completed their review and provided comments on the project. And May 1st, the applications were ultimately deemed complete. In terms of the proposed project, the existing use on the site is the Bishop Ranch Service Center. The proposal is to demolish the existing service center and construct 200 rental apartment units. Those units will go into two buildings. The first building we refer to as Building A is designed for families, 120 units. And then Building B is designed for seniors at 80 units. 198 of those units are considered affordable units or affordable to lower income households, and 2 of the units will be managers' units. A total of 160 parking spaces are provided in above-ground garages. And the applicant will be going over their site plan, but just real briefly, Camino Ramon on the left-hand side here, the Iron Horse Trail is on the rear of the property on the eastern property line. The access to the project will be off of Camino Ramon through Street A, and we'll have 2 separate buildings and access points off of Street A. And then just elevations of the buildings here on the upper part of the slide. You'll see a north building elevation looking south. So Camino Ramon, the taller building, the more orange brown building will be closest to Camino Ramon. And then the senior building will be adjacent to Iron Horse Trail. That's the more beige, lighter color building. And then this is on the lower half of the slide, you'll see the southern elevation looking northwards from Bishop Ranch 11, the adjacent residential project that the commission recently saw. This will be the view from that southern property line. In terms of development standards, the project was reviewed against the Downtown Mixed Use North standards. As we mentioned, the standards have been met with some exceptions in terms of density. The density does exceed the standard for Downtown Mixed Use North, which is typically 20 to 60 dwelling units per acre. The proposal is for 97 dwelling units per net acre on the 2.06 net acres on that property. And through state density bonus, that's something that is permitted. There's a maximum percentage that the applicant cannot exceed, and they're below that standard. And then as it relates to parking, there is a concession requested to reduce the amount of minimum parking on site from a zoning ordinance standard of 312 spaces and a state density bonus standard of 231 spaces to the proposed 160 spaces. Then moving into affordable housing, as I mentioned, the project proposes 198 affordable units. On this slide, you can see a breakdown of how those units will be are anticipated to be broken up by affordability level. AMI stands for the area median income, and those typically translate to extremely low, very low, low. And the city's inclusionary housing ordinance just at a minimum would require at least 15% of the units on this project to be set aside as low and very low income units. Their proposal is for 198 of those units to be in that lower income category. Then I mentioned there, as part of this application, there's a density bonus request for 2 concessions. There are no waivers that are requested as part of this application, and through state density bonus, the city, if the applicant requests, is obligated to grant for incentives and concessions, unlimited waivers, and have limited parking standards, and that's purely based on state density bonus standards. Now, the project is consistent with all the applicable land use descriptions and objective development standards, except for those that have been requested to be as a concession through state density bonus. Those 2 concessions are reducing the number of parking spaces. And so I mentioned that the city has a zoning standard, and then state density bonus has a maximum that the city can require for affordable housing projects. The applicant is requesting that that they reduce the total amount of available parking to below the state density bonus standard at 160 spaces. And then the second concession is because this isn't a mixed-use zone, mixed-use projects will require a residential and a non-residential land use. And because this site is not a housing opportunity site, and they are requesting a 100% residential project, that is the second concession that's being requested. So Architecture Review Board was the first review that took place with this project back in March. The ARB provided some additional feedback on the proposal, and they've provided recommendations to the project. You can see those attached to the staff report this evening on what those recommendations were and the applicant's feedback to those design comments. So the recommendation this evening is to accept this presentation staff report, and then we do need to conduct the public hearing, take public testimony, close the public hearing, and then if appropriate, we have attached draft resolution 04-25 to the staff report for consideration. So that concludes my presentation this evening. I know the applicant has a much broader presentation, so I can certainly take questions now, or I can ask the applicant to come up if you'd like.
Commissioner Wallace?
After.
Okay, so we will hear from the applicant. Thank you.
Which button makes it go forward? Okay, great. You know that high tech can get you every time. Good evening, Commission. Chair and other members of the Planning Commission, thank you so much for the opportunity to present our project to you again. We deeply appreciate the opportunity to come before you prior to this meeting to get your input and other additional input from community members. My name is Dixie Baus. I'm the Director of Real Estate Development for Eden Housing. Eden Housing believes that home is where your start is. That really is our mission, that is our goal, and that is what we live and breathe. Eden is a nonprofit affordable housing developer established 57 years ago. We have 170 communities that we own and operate throughout California in 15 counties and more than 50 cities. We serve more than 25,000 residents who call Eden home, and we have provided more than 12,000 homes throughout California. We're a full-service firm. We offer development services, property management services, and residential services throughout the ownership. I want to frame a little bit of the conversation and show you a little bit of our work. This is just some of our recent work that is around the same density type is what this particular project is. I'll kind of start at the top and go to the side. The top is a project that is in closing right now in San Diego. That project is 90 units per acre. That's what 90 units per acre looks like in terms of that density. Going next to Blue Oaks is a little less dense. Blue Oaks was 56 units per acre in terms of density. Our downtown Santa Cruz mixed-use library project, which is closing as we speak, is that project has 80 units per acre, and then just going down to the bottom, Pac South, which just put its lid on under construction, so we're pretty happy about that. It's moving quite at a decent clip. That's at 188 units per acre. And then going down into the very bottom right of the screen, that is a project in Hayward at one of the BART stations that we built in conjunction with other market rate developers, and that site is built at 105 units per acre. So bottom right, Altamira. Just kind of gives you a little snapshot of what the density looks like. For me, I needed to see it when I was presenting it as well. It's like, what does this mean? And so our proposal is definitely in line with what we have built and constructed in the past. I'm just going to brag a little bit about us. We've been around a while and we've won some really good awards as we go. But some of the top three that we're most proud of is on a national basis, we're one of the top 50 affordable housing developers in the United States. That means we own and keep that many units with the rest of the country. And also, and that has been in the running every year since 2016, when we first appeared on that list. The next one, you kind of go on and off this list as our annual production increases, but we've just been also named as the top 50 affordable housing developers. That starts per year, is where that number is. And then we're a best-in-class employer from Gallagher Insurance, and two recent brags, two of our projects that you saw on our density slide, Solera Apartments in San Jose and Blue Oak Landing in Vallejo, just won Golden Nugget Awards from national awards. So we don't set out to win awards when we design or propose buildings. We just build good buildings. And build things that really stand the test of time and work into the vision of the cities in which we work. Before I introduce Anshu with Steinberg Hart, I just wanted to go through. No, let me introduce Anshu. Anshu.
Thank you, Dixie. Good evening to everyone. My name is Angshupriya Pathak. I'm a senior associate at Steinberg Hart. So a little introduction about Steinberg Hart. We've been going strong for 75 years, and we believe in creating the world that we want. And in the past 75 years, our prime focus has been to shape and strengthen the communities that we live in through housing design. These are examples of recent housing projects that Steinberg Hart has designed, and I wanted to mention that two of these are Merit Award recipients at the AIA Silicon Valley Design Awards as of last month. And then back to Dixie.
Thank you so much. So one of the things that framed the way we approached this site was to follow our guiding principle, which was to put people first. A people-first development that embraced the fabric of what Bishop Ranch is in a vision of a walkable neighborhood that promotes non-auto uses. So in looking at that, there's 30,000 people working in Bishop Ranch right now, 30,000, with 10,000 homes that are planned in Bishop Ranch. And so our site is in the heart of this walkable little city, so to speak, within a big city, a neighborhood, the Bishop Ranch neighborhood. And so I wanted to look around the neighborhood to see who's already working in the neighborhood that we could potentially serve. And so these are jobs that are available right now in the community within a half-a-mile walking distance of Camino Ramon's site. That's our grocery store clerks, our retail clerks. That's our real estate representatives, our hotel crew, our daycare teachers, our librarian across the street, Parks and Rec employees with the city, firefighter, new firefighters in there, new city planner, professional development people, and construction superintendents. These are all people who work within 1/2 mile of this project site that would be income qualified to live at this property. I'll turn it back over to Anshu. Let me get my tools.
Thank you again, Dixie. Here's a quick recap of the project. There are 2 buildings on the site. Building 1 is a 7-story family building with 120 units and 120 parking spaces. Building 2, which is adjacent to the Iron Horse Trail, is a 6-story senior building with 80 units and 80 parking spaces. And it's a total of 198 units. And that, in addition to that, there are 2 managers' units for a total of 200 units. And as you'll see in the future slides, this project exemplifies sustainability features and resident-focused amenities. So as you know, the site is adjacent to the Iron Horse Trail, and the site and the buildings draw their inspiration from the trail to the east. And this is a vital context and a driver for the overall design of the building. And I want to mention, since we presented to you the last time, we took your comments, we incorporated them, and then we presented to the Architectural Review Board. And the following slides exemplify your feedback, which we incorporated into the design. So as you'll see, the shaping of the buildings help sequester the courtyards from the winds while maximizing the natural light access, daylighting access for the units. There is a linear arrival plaza running through the depth of the site. The courtyard-centered layout and the senior residence positioned within close proximity to the Iron Horse Trail, they're all responsive to the site and the building's strong connection to nature. The architectural language creates a lot of visual interest and tries to break monotony. We pull and push and carve into the facade elements. We peel at strategic corners. And then we also shape the building at the ground level to create a welcoming entry at the plaza entrance. And so here's some of the feedback we received from the Architectural Advisory Board. The board suggested additional emphasis on pedestrian experience overall. They recommended slowing down cars at the internal street, which is to the north. And they really liked the connection that we had established with the Iron Horse Trail. They also suggested shifting the building west to provide a stronger outdoor connection to the trail and also provide visual connection between all of the 3 outdoor levels and also provide a variety of gathering spaces. So here's how we incorporated the board's feedback. We added some transitional paving at the central community gathering space to the north. And we've also redesigned the landscape to create a focal point at the community gathering area to the south, which is the blue box to the south. We readjusted the footprint for, to allow for the senior building to now move slightly to the west. This allows us to create an outdoor podium space with visual connection to the Iron Horse Trail. We also carved out and created perch areas that you'll see flanking the central plaza. This allows access to the central community area, and they also provide visual similarity, which was requested by the board, and allows connection between all of the outdoor spaces. As mentioned, a variety of gathering spaces have been provided, reinforced by the perches that we created. And these allow for larger group interactions and also facilitate smaller group interactions, one-on-one interactions. So we continue to keep the emphasis on the corner towers, and we continue to strive to keep the cost down with, providing similar material palettes for both buildings. The ground floor does not have any retail to keep the cost down, and we have active spaces at the ground level. And then we have incorporated your suggestion to simplify the landscape. We've added specimen trees. Last but not the least, before I hand it over to Dixie, I wanted to mention that we will be continuing to investigate, planting options along Camino Ramon to ensure that there are no conflicts with the existing utilities on the right-of-way. And over to Dixie.
Thank you. I want to kind of close this up with a little bit about our parking and transportation program, because it is a people-centric, as we call it. We've done a lot of studies in looking at our own portfolio, but also other portfolios across similar projects in different cities. And what we determined in our proposal is that we have parked our apartments in our homes to the appropriate scale in which our residents use them. And in order to determine that, we did an analysis. And so we looked at 47 other similar affordable housing developments in the region and pulled the data from their expected parking demand. And the research definitely is consistent that low-income households are less likely to own cars, particularly multiple cars, than the median household income. And that the development is in a location that provides excellent access to multimodal transportation options. So when we were thinking about what multimodal transportation options are, typically we think about transit, bike, walk, but another category popped up in 2012, and that is stay, right? That is one of our transportation parking reduction principles as well. And that is our property site is within 0.01 and 0.04 of numerous bus lines. Also, the Presto autonomous bus that services Bishop Branch. In terms of bike, we are near and will provide infrastructure for on-demand bikes and bike parking in our own facility, robust bike parking, with a strong focus on recreation and open space, and that is shown through our connection to the Iron Horse Trail. In terms of walkability, we've definitely designed the walkability district in mind. That was so key. Take the same vision that you all came up with and bring that vision to life. And the pedestrian connectivity to the Iron Horse Trail was central to that. So we have two central walk-bike options there. And then quite frankly, stay. We had to make it easy for someone to get deliveries at home. Deliveries could include anywhere from food to medication to anything. The other couriers who drop by your house with the gray trucks. But also we want to make sure that inside our lobby, we include also a real-time transit info station. Because I don't want to be questioning when the next bus comes. I can easily put a monitor up in the lobbies that shows when does the next bus come? And really, really tap into the public transportation infrastructure that the city already has. And then finally, in terms of design on the inside, we wanted to make sure that we create work from home spaces so that people who do work from home have the option to get out and have a little bit of conference space, or maybe just sit up on the podium in the sunlight, if you will, and work from there. I'm going to give up the mic now. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the time to talk to you. We look forward to your questions. And again, we are deeply appreciative of the opportunities you gave us to collaborate with you for the design.
Okay, do we want to have any clarifying questions before we get to public comment? No questions? Later?
I don't have any clarifying. Go for it.
Okay, Commissioner Albert.
I just had a couple as it relates to, as you might guess, parking. My understanding in reading through what you presented, we have a city standard of 300 and something. We have a max from the state density bonus law of 231. And then by invoking or requesting a concession, does that take the required parking potentially hypothetically to zero under state density bonus? That if you wish to have a concession that says we don't wish to have any parking whatsoever, that's okay? Is that how that works?
That's correct.
Okay,
It is correct that we could actually request zero parking under state density bonus law.
okay. That's what I thought said. And then in the staff report, it does say that shared parking agreement is not possible with neighboring parcels. Could we expand on what not possible means, perhaps?
Each development, and this is, I'll talk from the ownership standpoint of the affordable properties. Each development is owned independent from all the other developments on the side. And so when we do our financing and we bring our investor and our lenders in, our lenders are going to look at the conditions of approval to say, okay, what are all the conditions of approval that you have on this project? And are they appropriate for this site? And so to have an off-site requirement when we don't need it to speak of, is, it's just something that, how do I say, I'm jumbling up my words.
That's okay.
It would make it very difficult for that risk point to be assessed by lenders and investors. Does that make sense?
Not entirely.
Not entirely. Let's see.
It might be easier if you explained why a lender would have a harder time lending money if one of the conditions of approval was to have some off-site parking, like I think you have programmed out in Livermore.
We don't have off-site parking programmed on our other projects in any other city. We don't. As a matter of fact, in our downtown Santa Cruz projects, we have zero parking in our mixed-use project with no provision to provide parking at that project. In downtown Livermore, we don't have a provision to provide off-site parking. And why a lender and an investor and an owner is saying, Dixie, you've designed and gotten approved this project within these parameters. Are you telling me that you don't believe that it's enough and adequate? That's the question they would ask. And so it would be one of those risk questions of an unknown that's not even known nor proven, because it's just an event that's not here. And so we look at what we've got right now and what our portfolio says and what other projects similar, not owned by us, say, in terms of an appropriate level of parking. And we've determined that we're actually above the appropriate level of parking. And so we're quite comfortable with the parking we're providing.
Okay, and then I think my next question might be for city staff. The parking study that was provided, how is that reviewed by the city for reasonableness or accuracy? Or how does that, what's the process that we go through to?
Because the state density bonus and concession does not require a parking analysis to be provided, whereas some non-SB 330 and non-state density bonus applications potentially would. The parking study was purely provided because at the last commission study session, the commission had requested additional information on how does this site compare to the parking demands at other sites and what has been the applicant's experience on other sites. And so it's purely just provided as informational only. It's not a requirement that a parking analysis be provided. It's just another data point that was provided as to the applicant's request for 160 parking spaces. As Dixie mentioned, state law, there's a couple of different sections in state density bonus that deal with parking. There are some that are outright 0 parking spaces and you don't need a concession. And then there's a request to ask for concession for reduction to potentially 0 parking spaces as well. And in this case, the request is for 160 spaces. And so your point about the parking analysis, it's really just provided for informational only
Okay.
because it's purely based on the applicant's experience.
Okay, so no peer review, no city
No.
engineer takes a look at it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you for that. And then I had another question on the design of the parking structure. There was a phrase I wasn't familiar with. I think it was 160 parking spots in an efficient garage. I was like, could you explain what an efficient garage might mean? You know?
I'm going to turn it over to Anshu.
Yes, thank you.
Wow, that's a great question. So an efficient parking garage would, to us, mean a few things. We don't go under grade. As you can see, the project is all above grade and cost efficient. We have 2 levels of parking podium for the family building, and then 1 level of podium for parking for the senior component. And we avoid unnecessary, ramps and unnecessary complications with the circulation within the garage. That's what efficient would mean to me.
Oh, okay, okay, no, that helps. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
We
Thank
had it
you.
mean something else. But I
Sure.
do have a question on the standards for parking structures for parking spots. Are those meeting all of our city code for the width and all that kind of stuff and drive aisles, or are the parking
Yes.
spaces what we would normally say small car only, for instance? Are they normal?
They're normal sized.
They're normal
yes.
size, they meet city standards. Okay, okay, good. And then my last question, or second last question, EV charging stations, how are those spread out on are they in certain parking stalls, or how do those get used by the residents, and how does that work in real life?
Did you want to? Yeah. Okay. So EV parking spaces, we would have to comply with the zoning code for the total number. And we would also have to comply with the accessibility, like a portion of it, 2%, would have to be accessible. So it would have to be located adjacent to the entry lobby for resident access and accessibility. And then as far as how it's distributed through the parking layout, Dixie, did you have a comment on that in terms of resident use?
Yeah, in terms of resident use, our residents don't own EV cars. They're expensive. They're expensive to maintain. They're very expensive to charge. And so while we do provide the EV charging infrastructure in our buildings, there's no use on them at this time.
Okay, so that they are included in the 160, some number of them would have the EV infrastructure associated with them, is that?
Yeah,
how I
that
picture this?
would be
Okay,
great.
but-
And I just quickly wanted to add to that, the number of accessible EV spaces would be over and above the accessible spaces required per building code. So it's not just compiled into one bucket, it's separate.
Okay, and then do in your properties, do people typically get assigned a parking spot, or is it first come, first serve, or how does that work?
They do get assigned a parking spot. If the household is not on a car, they are not assigned a parking spot. Their cars must be registered and legal, so there's no parking of inoperable vehicles on the site permitted.
Okay, and somebody might be assigned an EV parking spot, even if they don't have an EV car, I guess is kind of what I took from the previous question about.
It's possible. They may go on a waiting list for it, but like I said, we have not had a heavy
Sure.
usage at all at this point. So hopefully the cost of the EVs will come down. The infrastructure's there.
Certainly supposed to by 2035. And then my last question is, visitors to the project, especially to the senior facility, how do you handle visitors and where do they park?
There's some visitor spots outside of the gate of the parking garage for both a small number of units, and then there's drop-off area in between. So there's some non-gated spots available for visitors.
Okay, and does that included in the 160 total? Is some number, is that in addition to?
No, it's in addition.
Oh, okay, okay, very good. Okay, I think that's all my questions.
No, it's
Oh.
not 700 spots.
I think I probably would have guessed that.
I don't know how many they are.
Yeah, no, it's just when the kids want to visit grandma. You know.
Thank you for asking that because that was on my list. So as long as we're talking about parking, particularly for the senior housing, are we meeting the necessary handicap accessible parking
Yes.
spots?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
And I don't know exactly who gets this question, but first I have a comment, which is I was thrilled to see that the sidewalk on Camino Ramon is 7 feet wide. But as I'm looking at if we approve this project and you get it built, and until there's something on either side, it's a sidewalk to nowhere. Is that correct?
Ryan, did you want to take this question?
Well, I mean, at
Okay.
some point, we have a project that's been
Yes.
approved, but
Yes.
until that one gets built,
Yeah, BR7 has the connecting sidewalk to the south, and then to the north, there's not currently anything proposed.
okay,
Yeah.
you're off the hook.
Okay.
And
Thank
then
you.
this I think is for Dixie. As you operate these buildings and we're moving into what appears new for us, you sound like you're excellent managers. So does that include a code of conduct for your residents and what they can and cannot do? Is there some place that is tied in with the city that we are aware of that? I know we get HOA rules, but I don't know on these kinds of situations if that is part of any of the documents the city gets.
Chair, that's an interesting question. No, not really, because you can't require something of affordable housing that you don't require of market rate. So we have house rules.
Okay.
House rules that state, blatant disregard for other people's property or disturbing the peace or things like that are lease violations we're on top of. But no, we can't go beyond what any normal property management firm would require in their house rules.
Okay, that answers it. And then one more quick question. You mentioned that the road is a private road. As the owner and the operator, then you're also responsible for its maintenance rather than an HOA kind of situation.
The road inside internally? Oh, yes, we understand that.
Okay, thank you. I think those were the quick questions I had. Commissioner Wallace, you look like you might have another one.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with the points on parking that Commissioner Alpert raised, just so I have an idea about the number of parking spots. As I understand it, it can be basically broken down to 160 parking spaces for residents of the two buildings. B, there are some EVA spaces that you believe will never be used. And C, there will also be some parking spaces for visitors to either building, correct?
Last statement again, sir?
Yeah, the visitor spaces that Commissioner Alpert asked about, they are in addition to the 160 that are being reserved for tenants of the two buildings.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Second of all, I believe at the earlier session, you indicated that the two parking structures are separate in the sense that people who live in the family building cannot park in the senior housing and vice versa. Is that correct?
Yes, that is how we contemplate that ownership to be.
Okay. The third question is, assuming that you're wrong, that the parking spaces that you have set aside in the family building, which is 120 spaces for 120 units, is in fact inadequate because you have people who have two cars because they have two jobs to support themselves or take their kids to school. Where do you anticipate those people will place their vehicles outside the one spot that they have reserved in the building?
In some circumstances, in some of our developments, people don't have car parking spots and they may need it. And those people choose not to live at that development. So we have plenty of demand to fill our units with what we've got. And so they could choose not to live there. But the households themselves, if they have a car, will only have one space per unit.
Okay, and so is part of the application process, prospective tenants for both buildings are told they only have one space for their family, for example, in the
That's
family?
correct. They're told of every single amenity provided at the property.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I did come up with one more quick question. On the senior housing, you may have told us earlier, and I apologize if I've forgotten. What is the age cutoff or age acceptance for senior?
55 and older. One household member must be 55 years and older. The rest, if there's another person in the house, does not have to be 55.
Okay, thank you. Other questions before we hit the public hearing?
Not before public comment.
Okay, so at this time, we will open up for public comment. If you have a comment, please fill out a card and submit it. So do we have any public comments on this topic?
We received written communication from James Lloyd with Cal HDF, Kevin Burke with East Bay for Everyone, and Hugh June On. And I do have a speaker card from Ramon Amaral.
Okay, Mr. Amaral, if you please. We just ask that you speak into the microphone so we can all hear you as you're being recorded.
Lovely. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ramon Amaral. I'm a field representative for the North Cal Carpenters Union, Local 152 Martinez, which covers San Ramon. I want to ask the question if this project is required for labor standards. If not, how come? The applicant is taking full advantage of SB 330 and the density bonus law, which streamlines approval and maximizes profitability. And if the developer does not want to commit to fair labor, that raises red flags. Why should the city fast track subsidize a project that doesn't support the workers? SB 330 and the density bonus law exists to promote housing, not exploit workers. These policies provide massive benefits to the developers, allowing them to build more units, reduce parking costs, override zoning laws, and secure quicker approvals. But when a developer uses the benefits without committing to responsible labor practices, the result is lower wages, poor working conditions, and a race to the bottom for local hire. This city has a responsibility to ensure the public benefit come with public responsibility. If a developer is receiving zoning and financial advantages from the state and the city, then they need to commit to fair wages, proper training, and the workers' protection. Otherwise, we risk creating housing at the expense of the very workers who build it, undercutting local standards and opening the doors for wage theft, worker misclassification, and unsafe conditions. I urge the commission to require strong labor standards on this project through pre-qualification language, so we ensure that the project does not contribute to exploitation of workers in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that.
I have no other speaker cards.
Okay, so we will close public comments on this topic. And now, gentlemen,
Through the chair, the applicant does have the right to respond to public comments provided tonight.
okay, does the applicant wish to respond to the public comment? So noted. Gentlemen? Discussion.
I have some questions of both staff and the applicant. Okay, I'm going to have some softballs first for the applicant.
That's me. I get the softballs.
Okay, first question. Eden doesn't own the property that's the subject of this proceeding, does it?
This property that we're
Yes.
talking about,
Yes.
we do not yet own that property.
Do you have a written agreement with Sunset Development Company to acquire title to the property?
We do have land use, land site control document.
Well, the question I had to do with passing title from Sunset to Eden. Do you have a document that covers that?
There are a number of documents that we have, and right now we have a letter of intent with Sunset. We're working on our purchase and sale agreement, and we won't close on the property until we're ready to construct.
Okay. Do you have an option to acquire the property, or are you negotiating a straight purchase sale agreement?
I believe it is a straight purchase and sale agreement. I believe it is.
Okay. All can ask you to do is give your response to the best of your ability. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Next softball question. The staff report for this meeting says that Eden Housing made a request for 2 concessions. One had to do with parking, and the second had to do with non-residential use on the subject property. Did you make a written request to the city for such a concession?
Yes, we did.
And when did you do that?
When we submitted our application, we had a density bonus request letter.
Okay, and that was in when? January of 2024? Excuse me, January 2025.
I cannot recall. Staff would have that date of when that was submitted.
Okay. Let me try again this way. I believe that Eden Housing submitted 2 different proposals to the city. One was a preliminary application in September of 2024, and the second was a final application in January of 2025. Does that refresh your recollection when that written request was submitted?
No, it does not. Again, I think, I'd ask maybe Cindy to respond to that. Honestly, we submitted a lot of applications, and I don't know what was submitted on each single date.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, you can take a seat. I have some questions for Ms. Yee.
Hello.
Hi, you didn't think you'd get away without answering some questions.
Oh, no, I was prepared.
Okay, good.
Wore my short shoes today.
Okay. All right. The general plan 2040 for the DMU North area in which this particular project is located contains the following language. Development is generally intended to be vertical in nature with residential entryways taking advantage of the city's walking district and allowance for higher density. Development can be vertical mixed use or stand-alone residential in proximity to nearby commercial uses with a horizontal mixed use configuration. Now, the language in proximity to nearby commercial uses with a horizontal mixed use configuration does not appear in either of the 2 mixed use areas that were created when we approved General Plan 2040, which is the mixed-use commercial emphasis area or the mixed-use residential emphasis area, nor does it appear in the city center mixed-use area. As was pointed out, I believe, in December of last year, we heard an application from BR7 for property for development of housing in the DMU North area. As part of the staff report, the staff said, quote, development can be vertical mixed use or standalone residential in proximity to nearby commercial uses with a horizontal mixed use configuration, period. Additionally, let me emphasize the word additionally, as a housing opportunity site, the project can opt to construct a 100% residential project with no commercial component required. In March of this year, BR11 came in front of us, and in talking about the land use requisites for that solely residential project, staff said the exact same thing it did for BR7. Now, my understanding is that staff is now of the opinion that to qualify for the in proximity to nearby commercial uses, to qualify as a horizontal mixed-use project, both the nearby commercial uses and the property that is to be developed as solely a residential project have to have the same ownership or control? Is that staff's position?
So I want to make sure I clarify.
Let me break it down. Let me give you.
No, I understand. The Bishop Ranch 11 and Bishop Ranch 7 staff reports both have that same language. That language that was written was to describe what a downtown mixed-use zone typically exemplifies. The word additionally was added to help understand that in addition to your typical configurations within the DMU North, that there's also an opportunity for housing opportunity sites to propose 100% residential projects. And if maybe there is some confusion over the word additional that was added to that description of what DMU North can and cannot use in terms of land use, my apologies that maybe the additionally added confusion. But BR7 and BR11 are housing opportunity sites. And the point that was being made as far as whether or not a project has to have a mixed use component to that project was specifically related to the fact that those two sites are housing opportunity sites and are therefore have the ability to be 100% residential. This particular site that we're talking about, the 2453 Camino Ramon apartment site, is not a housing opportunity site. And so it does not have the benefit of using state law that allows for a 100% residential only project because it's not a housing opportunity site. And therefore, when you look at the zoning ordinance, there is a section that talks about mixed use. And then there is a section after that talks about additional development standards and mixed use development standards. It's specific that a mixed use project is a combination of a mix of uses on the same site. There are, and then it goes on to talk about horizontal and vertical, but effectively a project has to have those two components to be considered a mixed use project by definition. And so this project, even though it has access to an EVA access to the north, the project site and the project itself is purely just the 2.24 acres that is proposed. It is, and because of that, being only 100% residential, it does require a concession to what a mixed-use project as defined by the zoning ordinance requires, which is two different land uses. And that's really ultimately the concession, is that this project is 100% residential. It does not have a separate project component to the north that will create a larger project site that includes Bishop Ranch 9. It's purely just the 2.24 acres.
Okay, that explains what the conversation about this particular project. But my question had to do with the language that only appears in DMU North, that horizontal mixed-use configuration can be with nearby commercial uses as well as the solely residential use. And my question is it staff's position in order to qualify for that both the commercial use and the property for which only residential is proposed have to be under control or ownership of the same entity?
It does not have to be under the same entity control, but it has to be part of the project description and part of the project application, that the two sites combined would make up the project as defined in the project description. Currently, the applicant has decided that their project is contained solely on their 2.24 acres. They have no interest in combining their project site and their project description with any additional properties beyond their 2.4 acres. And so as a result, their project description is only for 100% residential. A project can be horizontal if they've chosen to combine a variety of parcels with their project and therefore connecting those two sites together, this application is simply just for the 2.24 acre site.
Okay. Now, both in the preliminary application and the final application, at least that we saw that was filed with the public, there was no mention of a concession being asked for regarding the mixed use aspect. In the staff report for our February 25 study session, the staff report said that the applicant was not asking for any concessions, but only a waiver of parking requirements. On the March 13th staff report to ARB, staff said that the applicant was not asking for any concessions. Now, for the first time, we're told that there is a concession requested for this project related to the mixed use aspects. Why was that not mentioned before this particular report?
Sure. So as you can see in the resolution, the application was not deemed complete until May 1st. There has been a number of different iterations of the project plans that have come since February 4th's Planning Commission study session. At the time that the applicant made their formal application in January, at the time their description of the project had intended to not include waivers or concessions. Through our review of the application, which was not deemed complete until May 1st, and then the consistency determination was not deemed until May 15th. That's also attached to the staff report. The information that staff provided to the applicant in terms of a complete application was that there was a need to clarify between waivers, concessions, and it's a very fine line between what a concession and waiver is. It's very difficult sometimes to summarize what is a waiver and what is a concession. And through consultation with our city attorney's office, ultimately the determination was what they're asking for is a concession. That is something that they need to identify in their project plans. And so that was ultimately why, as of May 1st, after we received all their final documents, that the consensus between city staff and the applicant was that 2 concessions were being requested.
So in the January 2025 submissions, in that application documentation, did the applicant say that it wanted some relief from having to provide a non-commercial use for its property?
In the project presentation, I believe in February, that was actually noted in the applicant's presentation that they would be 100% residential. And even if the applicant at the initial filing does not necessarily recognize that as waiver or a concession, it's staff's responsibility to identify that that does not meet development standards, and therefore you do need to identify that as a concession. So we have that all the time, and sometimes that's the difficulty of presenting a incomplete application to the Planning Commission, is that you'll oftentimes see that the feedback that staff provides to an applicant does not always reflect the initial plans that you're going to see during that study session.
So when did the applicant, whether they call it a concession, a waiver, or a wish list, when did they first communicate to staff that they did not want to have to provide a non-commercial use for the property that's the subject of this application?
That was clear from their project description initially when they filed in January.
Okay. Now, since you brought up the issue of concessions,
yeah.
The section of the government code that deals with those says as follows. This is Government Code Section 65915, subdivision K. It says, for the purposes of this chapter, concession or incentive means any of the following. 1, a reduction in site development standards or a modification of zoning requirements that would otherwise be required that results in identifiable and actual cost reductions to provide affordable housing costs. In the context of what the applicant is asking for, are they asking for, one, a site development standard reduction, or B, a modification of zoning code requirements?
It's related to the zoning code requirements because a mixed-use project by definition requires the non-residential residential. And because of that definition, that's the concession from the zoning stand.
Okay, and then would that apply, would that ability to get a concession apply to requirements that are found in a general plan as opposed to a zoning ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, now, doesn't well, let me go back. As you and I think the applicant have pointed out, our city has an inclusionary housing ordinance requires every housing project to contain a certain level of affordable housing, correct?
Right.
Okay. And the way our inclusionary housing ordinance is drafted, if the basic allocations between very low, low income and moderate income are followed, then that project automatically qualifies for a state density bonus, does it not?
Right.
Okay. Now, you've indicated that, if at least certainly for this project, that because they're entitled to a concession under the state density bonus law, they are entitled to a concession from the city so that in this mixed use area, they do not have to provide any non-residential use in their project, correct?
That's correct.
And isn't it true that every developer who proposes a housing project in DMU North, because they have to meet our inclusionary housing ordinance and it therefore qualifies for a concession under the state bonus law, has the ability to tell the city to go fly a kite on non-commercial, on non-residential uses on their project? They ask for a concession that says, we don't want to have to provide any non-residential use on our project.
Yeah, and depending on the amount of affordable that's provided, there a range between 1 and 4 concessions. This project qualifies for 4 concessions. If the applicant would like to use one of those concessions for the requirement for non-residential use, they can. Some projects may comply with that requirement because they need to save their concession perhaps for other items, but solely up to the applicant to determine what they would like to use their concession for.
Okay. So in the case of the project for residential development, where it meets the standard allocations of our inclusionary housing ordinance, that development will have the right to 1 concession, and that concession can be used to eliminate any requirement for non-residential uses on that project, correct?
Yeah, generally speaking, yes.
Okay, so for example, Bob buys the Bishop Ranch Veterinary Center down on Norris Canyon Road, and Bob decides that he doesn't want a commercial project there, least of all, he doesn't want a vet hospital. So he decides that he's going to build condos there. He complies with our inclusionary housing ordinance. Under that hypothetical, doesn't Bob have the right to force the city to not require him to develop any non-residential use on that property?
Hypothetically, yes.
Okay.
Through the chair, can we get back to the point at hand with the development application? Because this doesn't actually relate to the application. It's more about city policy.
Well, I disagree with you. This is an interpretation of our housing ordinance and also our general plan. I am not convinced that the staff's interpretation of that is correct. And I also think that if it is, this is something that ought to be fleshed out now.
Again, I don't follow how that relates to the application in front of you. If it's a policy question as to what housing policy should be for land use within the city, that's a different topic. You have a development application in front of you right now that has been deemed consistent with the standards, meets the standards for density bonus. So that is the issue in front of you now, and discretion is somewhat limited based on state law.
Well, you jumped the gun. I was finished asking questions on that point. So that's all the questions I have for Ms. Yee.
No other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So discussion amongst ourselves. Gentlemen,
Go ahead.
First of all, I like the project. I think the architecture and the design layout, I appreciate the changes made since we first saw it. So thank you for that. And I can't see you through the podium, but thank you for doing that. I think you did a nice job with that. Also, extremely impressed with your resume and the projects that you've built and the information you've shared. I am still concerned just because I don't live in this world about parking. And I know that when there's not enough parking for the residents, then they'll find someplace else to park. And I understand and I appreciate the comment that ultimately they self-select that this isn't the place for them if it doesn't work. And it sometimes manifests itself into spilling into neighborhoods, but we don't have neighborhoods with parking, so it could potentially spill into other places in Bishop Ranch, and then they'll need to work through that in the future. Other than that, parking, and I do have a question. And it was sort of asked already, when you learn that there's a parking problem, for whatever reason, because people have two cars or whatever it is, how do you become aware of that? And then typically what might you do? And my ultimate question is, if we learn that there is a parking problem, would it be Eden's responsibility to come up with some version of a plan to address it so that people aren't parking illegally down the road? Would you become aware of it, or would the property manager become aware of it? Is that how this usually might play out? Or is it such a foreign concept in your projects that it never happens? Sort of a hypothetical, but if something comes up, will you become aware of it? And then typically what would you do? And is it okay to look to the property manager to implement some version of a plan to address the problem?
I want to be thoughtful and responsive at the same time, because we are talking hypothetically. What we have in front of us today is what we've proposed in our application. However, in the event that there becomes a problem with any of the adjacent properties, be it the adjacent properties parking on our property, or vice versa, or spilling out into an area that creates a nuisance, we are very much part of this community. Eden is a very responsible firm, and so we would be absolutely willing to sit down and make certain that our residents were not impacting other properties, and vice versa. We would respectfully go to neighboring properties and have a conversation between the two of us. And so if that brought up some different circumstances and different transportation demand options down the road, we don't know what's going to be created, correct? I mean, this community already has a bus that runs through the neighborhood, which is phenomenal. And we don't have that in the vast majority of our projects. We're lucky to have that in Mountain View, and Mountain View is parked very similarly. And we don't have issues within our residents or within our neighborhoods that I'm aware of that suggest otherwise.
No, I probably could have guessed that would be your answer, because I just get that's the sense of how responsible you are. And my question, and it's not included in any of the conditions, and I assume that you'll just do this without a condition or not, that and not designing a solution, because I agree with you. We have no idea what things will look like in 3 or 4 or 5 years when it's filled up, if there even ever is a problem. But would like to look to Eden to take ownership of working with the neighbors or the residents to try and attempt to resolve whatever it is at that time, without designing a solution, not saying that how you're going to fix it, because we don't know what things look like. But would you be amenable to a condition that says that should there be a problem, and I don't know the wording, but I'll let staff deal with it. Should there be a problem that the city or Eden becomes aware of, Eden will take necessary steps to address. Something in that vein, just to, do exactly what you said you would normally do with all of your projects.
Right, but I thank you for the question, and I would respectfully decline that because it isn't a condition of today's approval. But obviously, we're part of a neighborhood, we're part of a city, we're part of the Bishop Ranch CCNRs as well. We have a vested interest, and so to put a condition of approval that says, well, maybe in 5 years there might be a problem and you'll solve the problem as a condition of approval is the same sort of problematic as if you say, hey, I think you need to build 30 more parking spots 10 years from now because, hey, you got it wrong.
Okay.
Those are hard hypotheticals.
No,
so
I understand.
I
But
appreciate
I
that.
I do know that we impose lots of conditions on an applicant, to everything from recycled water, whether it exists or not, to hours of operation for grading, to committing to be a good neighbor, and producing TDM literature and educating on buses and things like that. So we do commit applicants to educating and working with their residents all the time. So I didn't think this would have been a hard ask.
Well,
I'll be honest.
we have a TDM agreement in there to educate our residents. And if this is in alignment with that, of course.
Mhm. Yeah,
I mean,
that was just an example. You do
Okay.
commit to a lot of things that you agreed to do. So I didn't think this was going to be a stretch to memorialize the.
I mean, we can
What-
certainly look to you for additional language in the TDM where we have said, oh, yes, of course we'll do
Yeah,
that.
no, it's not TDM. That was an example. It was just by analogy, there's a lot of things that we ask anybody to do, that may or may not matter. You're signing up to educate every future resident on the rules, for instance, and
Yeah.
so this was just asking if you would be willing to commit to addressing problems if they ever come up. But I understand your
We
answer.
absolutely will address problems if they ever come up with this city. Absolutely.
Okay.
Regardless if they're written or unwritten.
Okay. No other comments?
Other statements, Commissioner Wallace?
As I understand, this is the first of 4 permitted hearings under SB 330 for this project.
Technically.
That is correct.
Okay. We have 2 commissioners who are missing. As far as I know, neither one of them recused themselves from this project. To have that many commissioners absent from a project that includes 200 units on 2 acres, to me, seems to be pushing this forward for an unnecessary reason. As far as I can see, there's no immediate need to approve this project. The applicant doesn't own the property. The applicant hasn't even reached an agreement with the owner of the property to acquire the property. As far as I can see, continuing the hearing to a date in the reasonable near future to allow our other 2 commissioners to participate certainly seems to me to make sense. I also think that there are a number of documents and questions that need to be answered before we vote, which is why I also think that the hearing ought to be continued for a brief period of time. The first is this: under our municipal code, the only entity that can ask for a land use development type of agreement, project like this, is the owner of the property. Eden has been forthright about the fact that it doesn't own the property. The other category that can file an application like this is an agent or representative of the owner if they are authorized and if there is a written consent from the owner that they so act. As far as I know, and the record doesn't show otherwise, Eden is not in that position. So under our municipal code, which for the record is section D6-16, the applicant for this project isn't eligible to make this application. Now, I asked about agreements between Eden and Sunset because there are some circumstances under which a person who is not a fee owner of property may have sufficient rights in the property to nonetheless ask for permits, variances, and the like from a city, depending on what the ordinance says. And so I think that in fairness to Eden, that it should be given an opportunity to show that although it's not the owner of the property, it has sufficient rights in the property at issue to be able to ask for this type of entitlement application, bearing in mind that whatever happens, nothing's going to happen for a couple of years. The second thing that I think ought to be provided is the written application that was filed by the applicant, as she said, that asked for the concession that we now find out about here. Section D7-79 of the municipal code requires that requests for concessions be in writing. That also requires that concessions be considered and granted by the Planning Commission. It simply means that whatever documentation is submitted to show what concession is being asked for belongs in the file that we get, not buried in a file cabinet someplace. So I think those two things need to be provided for our next hearing. The third thing has to do with the issue about DMU North. I disagree with Mr. Barr that this is something that doesn't relate to this property. As I pointed out, the language in DMU North about residential in proximity to nearby commercial uses is only found in DMU North. It's not found in any of the mixed-use areas. I do remember that during one of our hearings for the general plan that a comment was made that in part that particular language was being used so that an applicant who wanted to build housing wouldn't have to tear down commercial space in order to provide the housing. It seems to me that what we need, and because of the fact that this has, as was pointed out by Ms. Yee, an application beyond this particular project, is an opinion from the city attorney whether a request under the state density bonus law for a concession to eliminate the requirement for non-residential use in a project within the DMU North area is consistent under the state and city density bonus laws because it concerns the general plan and not simply the zoning ordinance. The second thing, and again, I disagree with Mr. Barr on this, but the second question I would like the city attorney to answer is whether if a concession to eliminate the requirement for non-residential use in a project within DMU North is consistent with state density and city bonus laws, that would apply to other mixed-use areas in San Ramon, including mixed-use commercial emphasis and mixed-use residential emphasis. Now, it's been argued that, well, that doesn't apply to this particular project. I disagree for among other reasons. If you grant a concession for this project on that basis, that you are basically cementing the city to do the same thing for every other project in DMU North, the mixed-use commercial area, and the mixed-use residential emphasis areas, because to the extent that those allow for residential developments, what you are saying is that by definition, every residential project that is proposed in any of those areas has the right to eliminate any requirement for a non-residential use in any of those areas. And when we drafted the general plan, we spent meeting after meeting after meeting trying to come up with a way of preserving our commercial usage in areas, not only just in DMU North, but in the areas along Crow Canyon Road. And if we are now being told that all that work that we did was basically for naught because any developer who wants to come in and develop housing, and they have to develop housing to have a project in those areas, can dispense with a commercial use. The problem we have of cannibalizing our sales tax and commercial space in San Ramon will only be exacerbated. Now, maybe that's the way the law is. But it seems to me on something that is important as this, at this point, when we have a specific project to point to and time to look at it, that we ought to ask the city attorney to come up with a thoughtful, reasoned opinion why we are giving up the right to actually force people to have a commercial use in a mixed-use area. For those three reasons, I would move to have this hearing continued for a date certain to allow those questions and those documents to be provided, and to have our other two commissioners an opportunity to weigh in on these issues and the project as a whole. The project as a whole, it is completely different than what we've had in San Ramon. To a lot of ways, it checks the boxes. The issue about parking, I agree with the fact that the city could have been forced not to provide any parking whatsoever because of the way the project is structured. And I actually came up with a way to actually give the applicant credit for not doing that. So this is a project that really needs to have more time and more commissioners in attendance than we have tonight. So I would move that we continue the hearing to a date certain in the near or intermediate future.
We have a motion. Do we want to move on this? Make a second?
Through the chair, may I respond to a couple of the comments raised?
Yes.
Okay, there was a question raised regarding ownership and authorized agents. The ownership does not affect the ability of the applicant to file an application with permission of the property owner. Sunset Development is the owner of the service center and has authorized the applications and signed the applications, allowing Eden to proceed. So that's the first question. The timing of construction that was raised, this idea that it's not going to happen in the near term, is irrelevant and not within the purview of the Planning Commission. You don't decide the timing of projects. Staff doesn't decide the timing of projects. There's an approval period that's valid for a certain amount of time. If they fail to get a project executed in that time, they have to come back or get extensions. With regard to the idea of waiving a standard such as the mixed use standard through density bonus provisions, I would suggest that it's essentially no different than waiving the FAR standards that was in the general plan DMU North standard for both DMU North and DMU South. That was been done with density bonus provisions, at least in the North for Bishop Ranch 7 and 11. And there was no concerns related to the authority to do that. And we have since amended that standard because of that particular condition. The city attorney does review our work and has been in consultation with us and hasn't raised any concerns with the process going forward. If you would like the city attorney to weigh in on potential issues and concerns moving forward with future development within the area, I think that's a fine idea. We can do that. I just don't know that it necessarily relates specifically to this project, given SB 330 constraints, the fact that the project's been deemed complete, the fact that it's been a consistency determination has been made. We have an obligation to follow through on the project. Whether an extension of time to allow additional commissioners to participate in the process, that's within the discretion of the Planning Commission, but I don't know that there's necessarily a compelling reason to do that outright. Again, what would be the reason for not taking action on a project that has checked all the boxes related to what state law and SB 330 requires of us? And again, I'm not suggesting that you don't have the authority to continue this out, but I would probably want something a little bit stronger as to why, when many of the questions have been addressed through the process. So,
I would also add that the developer has asked for the 2 concessions. As Mr. Barr did say, that once that consistency determination is made, those concessions basically are locked in, and the city has very limited authority. And the burden of proof is on the city to show that there are not cost reductions to the project, and there is a health and safety issue. And so staff has not found any health and safety issues by granting these concessions. That's a very high bar that the commission would have to find and do their own research.
It does seem that one of the sticking points at this moment is the letter that we have had in our packets for other developments, the concession, the concession request letter. Does staff have that in your files? The concession request letter.
It's on the plans.
As Missy explained, that through when applications are filed, as we share with the commission, it's an iterative process. They come in incomplete, and we work through them to get into compliance with the applicable codes and regulations. In this case, to comply with the applicable code and regulations, being 100% residential and a state density bonus project, they were allowed 2 concessions. So they can basically say, we're not going to meet those development standards, we're asking for concessions. The analysis ends at that point that they asked for the 2 concessions. And while it's documented in a letter from the applicant filing the application or through the staff report, it is all part of the administrative record.
Okay, so that is part of the legal documents that are part of this proposal.
That is correct. It's part of the vetting process of reviewing an application. That's staff's responsibility.
Okay. So if I hear what you're saying correct, that us as the commission, we're not hanging ourselves out to dry because that document is not in this packet tonight.
Correct. It's addressed in the staff report and addressed in the resolution in the state density bonus whereases.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Sure, not a problem.
Okay. So Commissioner Wallace raises many issues that are very technical, and we don't have the 2 of us who are also here don't have the same level of expertise in our state law or our city laws, nor do we have those response to this packet. But at the same time, and the issue of the other 2 commissioners not being here, we have one who's very new, has not really sat through many of these meetings. And so that kind of whittles it down to we're missing one who's been more active on the commission. And that's with no disrespect intended in my comment. I personally, as a member of this commission, I'm not in favor of continuing this to another meeting. So that's kind of part of my discussion. I've not heard a motion, a second on Commissioner Wallace's motion. So Commissioner Alpert, you want to weigh in on this? Put you on the spot.
So just to confirm, Chair, the motion made by Commissioner Wallace dies for lack of a second.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm trying to think through under SB 330 and the consistency determination, the realm of decisions that we can make is fairly limited. And if there was additional information that would, and really at the end of the day, it's either yes or no. It's either you vote yes or you vote no. And if you vote no, you have to have a very high bar to get to no. And so I'm trying to process the information that Commissioner Wallace suggested would be helpful. Is that helpful for, as Mr. Barr said, having a more in-depth policy decision as it relates to other areas of the city, or is it related to this particular development project? And I think the suggestion that Commissioner Wallace made, that Commissioner Barr thought might be a good thing to at least spend some quality time thinking through, makes sense. But it doesn't necessarily make sense to influence the decision that we'll make tonight. As it relates to two other commissioners, I go through the same thought process. What will any additional commissioners, new or seasoned, bring to the discussion when everything has so far complied with either city ordinances, state density bonus law, and the consistency determination? So with that lens, I feel that continuing the meeting for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is, will not add anything to the process. And I think the three of us are experienced and we have thought through this a lot, along with staff and all of the discussion, that I'm prepared to make a motion that we review and vote on the resolution and the conditions tonight.
Through the
So make
chair,
that motion.
pardon me, may I ask for a brief 5-minute recess?
Yes, that will be fine.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will be back at 7:40. All right, thank you very much. We are back on the record. Appreciate that, everybody's, so we have gotten some information from staff. So like to just refresh where we are on this, which is there was a motion to continue, but it was not supported, so the motion was withdrawn. And I believe that Commissioner Alpert was interested in making a motion to approve the project and to go through the resolution and the conditions of approval. So is that where we stand at this point?
Yes.
Okay, so Commissioner Alpert is nodding in case
Yes.
the record did not reflect that. Okay. So I believe that I can second the motion.
You may.
So I would like to second that motion that we approve the project tonight. So questions, discussions? Or shall we go through the resolution? Okay, so we're going to go through the resolution. So here we go. All right, so for those of you keeping track, we are on page 23, packet page 23. So this is the resolution, the Planning Commission of the City of San Ramon approving development plan DP 024-0007, architectural review AR 2024-0014, tree removal permit TRP 2024-0010, and the environmental review ENVR 2024-0003 for the Camino Ramon apartment residential development project located on an approximately 2.2 acre parcel at the Bishop Ranch Service Center of the Bishop Ranch Business Park. Okay. So as we usually do, we kind of walk through page by page. If we have questions or comments or corrections. So starting on page 1, do we have any things that need to be caught?
I have nothing on the resolution.
Um,
Resolution, so Mr. Wallace has any, we can jump. to
Okay.
that review.
Commissioner Wallace?
So I assume that your comment, Commissioner Alpert, was on the entire resolution?
Just the resolution, have the conditions.
Okay, I agree with you.
Okay, so we're going to go all the way. Now correct me, do we vote just on the resolution or we go through the conditions next?
The conditions also, and you can just generally ask, are there any changes to the conditions of approval or any suggested amendments?
Okay,
Rather than going page by page. if you prefer.
fantastic. All right, so conditions of approval, the same application. Are there any things that need to be questioned or amended or corrections, gentlemen?
I was good until 13. I had a question on 13.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm. All right,
Um,
go ahead.
It says it's binding upon the initial developer. Does that imply that it's the initial developer or any subsequent owners if they should sell the property, or initial and any future owners? If affordability? It was called out that it was the initial developer, that the affordability shall be binding upon the initial developer, which is Eden, but down the road, if Eden should sell the property, does it still apply?
The affordable housing agreement will be recorded against the property, so it would carry forward, but we can add and successors of interest.
Yeah. That's,
Okay.
this is good.
Excellent. Can I ask a request to go back a page? I'm sorry. Statement number 5. The first line, which says, as applicable prior to construction of the project, the project proponent. That is a term that I've not encountered before. We get a clarification.
Basically, the project sponsor, the one who's constructing the project. So in that case, it would be Eden.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, other questions, gentlemen?
41 and 42, the applicant shall consider implementing a community-based electric car sharing service such as Envoy. And then 42, the applicant shall consider innovative parking programs. It feels a little bit tentative to me. I don't know what shall consider is. And at a minimum, I'd like somehow the zoning administrator to be involved in reviewing, similar to, is recycled water eligible or something to that extent, to just upgrade the wording a little bit, and the shall consider is a little bit too vague and loose in my mind.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can put a ZA authority for review and
Perfect.
consideration,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay. Mm, mm, mm. Okay. All right, anything else, gentlemen?
Nothing else.
No? Okay. I think we've gotten to the end. That's page 22 of 22. All right, so we have gone through the conditions of approval. We've gone through the resolutions, made the notations, and corrections. Shall we vote? Okay, so we have moved Commissioner Alpert, and Commissioner Kuznick has seconded. All right. The motion has passed 3-0-0 and 2 not present. All right, thank you very much.
Usually 30 days, whatever.
So, oh yes, you have an appeal comment.
Yeah, the decision of the planning commission is subject to appeal within 10 days. Trying to extend it out. Anyone wishing to appeal will need to file proper paperwork and fees with the city clerk.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. Good luck. All right, item 9.2, Little Bridges Daycare. We have a presentation from Annalisa. Oh, here we go. Thank you. I think your name has changed. That's why I didn't call you by your last name. Apologize. And how do you say Mirzad? Yes. Welcome.
Okay, good evening, commissioners. The application before you tonight is for Little Bridges Daycare. It is located at 9015 South Gale Ridge Road, within the Canyon Creek Presbyterian Church, and the general plan and zoning designation is public and semi-public. So the church and daycare center was originally approved by the Contra Costa Development Department in 2003. And the original conditions of approval limited the capacity to a maximum of 109 children. Little Bridges is the daycare center operator and has been licensed through the Community Care Licensing Division with the State of California's Department of Social Services to operate with 205 children as of November 2006. An additional request to license up to 229 children prompted a fire inspection. The fire department informed staff and instructed the applicant to contact the Planning Services Division as a result. On March 24th of this year, the applicant submitted a use permit application to increase the child daycare capacity to a maximum of 237 children. And so the applicant is proposing to increase existing daycare operations and provide services for up to 237 children within their existing programs. They currently offer 3 programs: a program for infant ages 4 months, 2 years, preschool ages 2 to 5 years, and school age 5 to 11 years old. And hours of operation are 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. with fluctuating drop-off and pickup times. No expansion of the building or site-wide changes are proposed under this application. There would be modifications to the floor plans, For example, the infant and preschool programs run entirely on the first floor with some school age designated areas. On the first floor, room 101 would change from a preschool aged classroom to an infant classroom. And the applicant would also like to expand their school age program on the second floor and is requesting the addition of rooms 204 and 205. And the facility has 2 outdoor play areas. The outdoor play area adjacent to the parking lot is enclosed by an 8-foot fence, and the internal play area is surrounded by classrooms and a 4-foot fence. And required parking for the child daycare land use is 1 space for every 6 children, which would result in 40 parking spaces, and the site provides 165 parking spaces. Up to 12 parking stalls in the front of the building will be utilized for drop-off and pickup purposes. And the daycare center, to reiterate, has been licensed by the Community Care Licensing Division to operate with 205 children since 2006. The city has not received complaints from the public since the increase in 2006, and the daycare center will continue to operate within the existing property and will not result in a parking deficit. And with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission receive the staff report, open the public hearing, discuss the subject application, and if appropriate, adopt the Planning Commission Resolution 0525. And the applicant is available for questions if you have them as well.
Great. Do we have any questions of staff before we hear from the applicant? Okay, is the applicant going to make a presentation?
They do not have a
Okay,
presentation.
did you not? Any questions? All right, so I will open the public comment on this. Do we have any comment cards?
Not for this item, but written public comment was received from Kevin Burke.
Okay, thank you very much. We have received that. All right, so we will close public comment. Questions, discussion, gentlemen?
I don't have anything tonight on this one. Go ahead. Yep. Any questions, comments, Chair?
I do not.
Okay. Okay, I'll go ahead and make the resolution that we adopt resolution number 0525, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Ramon approving land use permit 2025-002 for the child daycare facility use Little Ridges located at 9015 South Gale Ridge Road.
Commissioner Wallace, are you interested in seconding?
I did have one change. Let me retract a bit. I have nothing.
Oh,
This has to do with the resolution, if you want to go on to that. On packet page 122, that's page 2 of 3 on the resolution, where the third sentence down says, now, therefore it be it resolved that the zoning administrator does hereby make the following findings. I think it ought to be the Planning Commission.
Duly noted.
okay, good catch.
Other than that, I have nothing else to add.
And I will change my motion as amended at the dais.
Okay. Excellent. I would just like to comment then on page, packet page 123, that the chairperson's last name has been misspelled, but
We'll correct it. And I apologize.
okay, do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Excellent. All right, so the motion by Commissioner Alpert, seconded by Commissioner Wallace. As noted with the changes. Oh, and this passes 3-0 with 2 no votes not being present. Okay, did we go through the conditions of approval? Okay, perfect. Done. Okay, moving on. All right, item.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Wait,
You go down there.
we missed one. Hold on. I believe we have the next one, but it's not on my. Yes.
It's page 4 on your script.
Page 4. Oh, sorry. Turn the page, James. Okay, there it is. Thank you. All right, there. Okay, perfect. Item number 10, non-public hearing action items, the Heritage Park Public Art. All right, Mr. Barr.
Good evening. I'm going to provide a brief introduction and then turn it over to the applicants to walk through their art proposal. So the project is, or the piece of art being considered tonight is associated with the Bishop Ranch Heritage Park site. It's 6141 Bollinger Canyon Road. The Heritage Park site is originally a part of the City Walk Master Plan. It was referred to as South Parkway Green. It was approved by council back in 2020. The site's currently vacant. It's approximately 1.4 acres, and this is a privately owned and publicly accessible open space. Sunset's vision for the park is to provide an amenity for the adjacent residential uses as well as the public at large. The applicant actually provided the park design to Planning Commission back in to Parks Commission back in October of 2024, and then the Planning Commission approved it in November of 2024. And so as part of that original approval, there was an art location that it was identified both for the Architectural Review Board as well as the Planning Commission, but the specific art piece was deferred until now. So the proposed piece of art is being proposed tonight is the Little Big House. This art concept was reviewed by the Arts Advisory Committee back in April of 2025. After some discussions, the Arts Advisory Committee recommended approval with some comments to the Parks Commission. And then on the 28th of April, the applicant actually provided some responses to the feedback from the Arts Advisory Committee, clarifying the design intent, color psychology, as well as the relationship of the color and the location within the park design. And then on May 14th, the Parks Commission voted to recommend the art installation as proposed to the Planning Commission. So what we have before you tonight is a resolution recommending approval of the proposed art feature. Now, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Dorka Keen for Keen on Art from Keen on Art to present and walk through the presentation. Sorry for butchering it.
It's usually my first name gets usually butchered.
Okay. And then if you want, you can either use the arrow.
Okay, great. Commissioners, I'm Dorka Keen with Keen on Art. I have a firm that specializes in placemaking and public art, and I'm really delighted to be here to share with you Bishop Ranch's first permanent public artwork. I thought it would be useful to provide a little context because it is not an isolated artwork. It is an artwork that is part of a larger vision. While we're not here to discuss the larger vision, I think it's important that you know a little bit about it. I will be coming back later this year to go through the art master plan that I was brought on by Sunset Development to develop in the fall of 2023. I gathered input from community members, from city members. I really want to thank Lauren and Debbie and Brad and Kathy, who's retired, for their input over the year or so that we worked on this. And the art master plan concept was reviewed at a joint meeting of Parks and Community Service and Arts Advisory Committee on February 21, 2024. So the vision is to create an enduring and involving world-class destination for the arts with artist-designed follies that support the development of a unique visual identity, creates connection, enhances public spaces, and activates the street experience. So we really looked at a lot of your plans, your walking and biking plans, your master plans for the city. So what is a folly? A folly is a structure or object constructed primarily for decoration, but suggesting appearances for some other purpose, usually mysterious. out in the landscape. So they defy straightforward categorization, and they invite an ongoing evolution how they're interpreted. The most famous folly today is the Eiffel Tower in San Francisco, which is, I'm sorry, San Francisco, in Paris, France. I wish it was in San Francisco. So it is the number one tourist attraction for Paris. But follies take on a variety of different forms: pavilions, gazebos, large-scale sculptures, obelisks, gateways. And so really the idea was to have this overarching concept that we could then have freedom to play with the artworks as Bishop Ranch and City Walk continues to evolve. And as you know, City Walk is the first 135 acres that's going to be developed into a mixed-use, walkable and bikeable downtown and sustainable downtown. So really speaking to these values. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the concept, the overarching art master plan, because as I mentioned, I'll be back later this year to really talk with you about it in detail. But really the idea was to have a series of artworks throughout City Walk, focal points along the parkways, the parks, connecting to the city's walking and biking plan. So different scales of artworks, different mediums of artworks, but all within this folly concept. And the first folly is going in City Walk's first privately owned, publicly accessible park, Popa. And as such, it's an art piece on private property and will be maintained by Bishop Ranch. As you can see, Heritage Park is located on the top right between Iron Horse Trail and East Access Road and Camino Ramon, and it's kitty corner to City Center. Just to go a little more into detail in the park, on the bottom right there is the artwork location. And the artwork, Camino Real is to the left, and Iron Horse Trail and East Access Road are on the right. And on the right is the under construction. I hope that's right for you. Am I doing it backwards? Okay. On the right is the under construction Belmont Living Senior Housing, and above will be the multifamily housing that's not yet built. And the artwork is located on the bottom right there. It's the red element there. It's nestled among the trees, which allows for viewing to the playground and the lawn and access from Iron Horse Trail. So we really wanted to have a location that this was really a park that is more focused on the neighborhood and the people that live there. There are other parks and other locations in the Art Master Plan that will have artworks that will be more of a draw for the overall public. But this artwork and this location were really focused on the neighborhood. Just to give you a little more perspective, here's a bird eye view of the park. What you're seeing there on the top left is the not yet built bi-related on the southwest corner. And then from the southwest, we're looking at Belmont, which is under construction. So, and there I've pointed out where the artwork is going to go. So again, the idea of a folly, and really we were thinking about this community, and a lot that we've been talking about in San Ramon is the need for shade and seating, and an artwork that also responds to Bishop Ranch's public art program vision and goals, which I talked about earlier. That is appropriate for all ages, but with special consideration for older people and those with ADA needs. And so when I started looking for artists for the park, I pulled together a group of artists that I thought would be excellent for this project because they were able to have finished other large site-specific projects on time and within budget. They use innovative materials or techniques, and particularly they encourage audience interaction. I presented 11 artist teams to Sunset, and out of those artists, that group of artists, we selected 3 teams to develop site-specific proposals. I really believe that artwork should be site-specific, should speak to that place, should connect to that place, whatever that means to that artist. But we developed an entire RFP, and these 3 artist teams developed their proposals. And the selected artworks were, the selected artists were R&R Studios, Roberto Bahar and Rosario Marquette. And they are architects also, and they create artworks that perform as social sculptures and tools for the pursuit of happiness. They seek to produce a public architecture that highlights the communal and civic dimensions of life and erases boundaries between art and everyday life. Their work has been exhibited internationally in museums and galleries. And they're both architects, as I mentioned, and they've taught and lectured all over the place, including Harvard, Yale, Cornell, et cetera. And they recently came out with a book on their sculptures that they completed for Princeton University. So the artwork, as Lauren mentioned, is The Little Big House, and it's a folly that celebrates the transformation of Bishop Ranch from farmland and office district into a vibrant residential neighborhood. And it's an artwork that's a contemporary folly that presents the illusion of the house. It's only enclosed on one side. It's sort of like a giant playhouse, and speaks to the concept of home in this new neighborhood. Its familiar form and childlike quality celebrates the idea of home, not only as a fixed place, but as a feeling of comfort, safety, connection, and identity. So it's a folly within the park that's created for the pursuit of shared joy. It's a social sculpture. It dissolves the boundaries between art and life and offers an open invitation for people to gather, play, and belong. So really the idea is to bring folks of different ages together to be able to spend time in there and to start creating their own stories. This gives you a little bit of an idea. We're looking at it from the lawn, from the playground. It's at the end of the path there so that it's easy. And the open end is facing the playground and facing the lawn. So parents, grandparents can spend time with the kids in there while also watching and those that are in the playground and having a sight line to the lawn. It includes seating on the inside. And here it is looking from the southwest into the picnic area. So adjacent to the folly are picnic benches and areas to sit. It's also easily accessible from Iron Horse Trail, so folks can come in from the trail to sit there and have fun in there also. And it will become more than a landmark. It'll become a cherished part of the park where memories will be created by those who visit and live in the neighborhood. I'm going to get a little more here into the brass tacks of what it's made out of. It's 16 by 16 by 6 feet wide. It's made out of steel plate. All the edges you can see will be rounded like what's shown in the photo. The artwork floor is metal also. It's a non-slip coating. It's designed for metal. And the coating creates a textured surface, increasing friction and grip for wet or slippery conditions. It's frequently used for outdoor metal stairs. The paint is Tnemec paint, which is better than powder coating because it's easy for touch-ups rather than needing to completely repaint it. It lasts over 20 years. It's excellent for, I've used this paint a lot with lots of different public artworks. It's easy to remove graffiti just with some rubbing alcohol. It's easy to keep clean with water and mild soap. The artwork is ADA compliant. The seating is ADA compliant. And obviously, like any other building, it will be structurally engineered with, official California structural engineers. The color is going to be red and yellow. I have some actual color samples here if you want to take a look. And this paint has been used by them and by me with other artworks in very hot areas. So I know that there was a little concern when we met with the art committee about heat. This is a solar reflective paint. You can see in the top right, this is an artwork that I recently completed in Dublin, California, where there are no trees. This location is going to be surrounded by trees. So there's definitely not going to be any issues there, but I've been out to the Dublin and sat in it, and it is not warm at all. They've also, the artists have used it in places like Arizona and have had no problems with it. So, and it is spec'd for hot locations. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the color, because being on the Planning Commission, that you are aware of the color palettes. It speaks to the vernacular of California and East Bay architecture. And actually, I learned doing this project that red paint was a popular choice by early settlers in California, as it was readily available and inexpensive. It used iron and oxygen as pigments, and it was used for houses and barns. That's why it was used for barns, because it was inexpensive. And red doors were considered a sign of welcome. And obviously, red continues to be used in Victorian and modern homes. The Mission Revival style is popular in the East Bay, features stucco walls and red clay tile roofs. And there's a variety of houses in the East Bay. I took that picture in Oakland. So red is used in housing. And I think really when the artists were thinking about the colors red and yellow, they really wanted something that, being that it's going to be in the trees, that you can see from afar, that you'll be able to see it down from the lawn, you know, it'll just be kind of peeking out a little bit. And then yellow, again, is a color that's frequently used in California and East Bay houses, Victorians. It's considered warm and cheerful and optimistic. It's often the bottom right there shows a California bungalow, which is frequently yellow. And then I took a photo of this house that recently sold in San Ramon, which is yellow with red shutters. So again, these colors really, the artist really thought about what speaks to home, what really speaks to California, what's site specific here. And again, the colors palette speaks to an established visual vocabulary in contemporary public art, where red and yellow often appear in large-scale sculptures. I don't know if you, at Moscone Center, that's the Keith Haring, the red, yellow, and blue. Below it is a Bay Area artist, and on the other right side is another very famous artist, and in the middle is Keith Haring's yellow. So again, it's used frequently in public art. Regarding lighting, there's established lighting that is already being installed in the park. There are 3 16-foot type 3 LED light poles that surround the artwork, ensuring uniform and widespread illumination, and are strong enough to light artwork, including the inside. So additional art lighting is not required. And then again, here's the artwork budget, which is again being paid out of Sunset Development's art and beautification requirement. And like a house or any other structure, it requires things like foundations and structural engineering. So sculpture, fabrication materials, installation, engineering, creating and shipping, insurance, and the artist fees. And the budget is $375,000. And that is my presentation. Are there any questions?
No questions, but could you hold up the red? I'm just curious what it looks like
Sure.
out on paper. Just the PowerPoint doesn't do it justice.
Because they're artists, they are going to come out here to really check the color with the trees and the lighting in San Ramon, et cetera. So they're very committed to making sure the colors really are perfect for the location. Because as you know, having probably painted some houses yourselves, you think the color looks great, then you get it on your house. And so they're very committed to making sure the color, and they're she's also, besides being a sculptor and an architect, is also a painter. So color is really important to Rosario.
Other questions?
I do not have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question for staff.
Sure.
This is, this is the first art project I've seen come to the Planning Commission. And I know it's under an architectural review. Could you just kind of fill in how that works out? Because the idea is the city's not paying for it and it's not going to be on city land. So I'm just kind of,
Yeah.
if you could just clarify that.
So there's the Art and Public Places procedures that have a series of review steps associated with public art. From the ARB, whose task is to look at the location and context of the piece. Arts Advisory Committee gets into the detail of the piece. We brought in the Parks Commission because this is a private park and they should be involved in that. That's not typical. And then Planning Commission would ultimately have land use authority over it. Now, it's more, I think the original intention of the art procedures would be that the art would be proposed with the development proposal that you would be seeing on day one. But because this was deferred, we brought it back through the process. And so the architectural review application is simply a mechanism to bring it through the process.
Okay.
But you've already approved the actual park design and the location. So it was just a question of what's the art piece going to be. And then, as it was mentioned, this is funded through Bishop Ranch, so it's not city funds being used for it.
Okay. Thank you. That I did have a lot of those questions, so thank you. Anything else, gentlemen? Okay, let's go to the resolution.
Do we do public comment?
Public hearing, please.
We have the
Public
public
comment.
comment. I'm sorry. Do we have any public comments?
I don't have any written communication or speaker cards for this item.
Okay, very good. I don't think the public part was on my agenda here. Okay,
Go
so
ahead and make a resolution that we adopt resolution number 0625, resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Ramon approving architectural review application 2025-0003 for the public art installation at Heritage Park.
okay,
I would second the motion.
all right, so we have a motion and a second. Okay, so the motion passes 3002. So,
I'll just mention the approval of the Planning Commission is subject to a 10-day appeal period. Anyone interested in an appeal can follow the grounds for the appeal as well as the fees with the city clerk's office.
excellent,
Thank you.
Looks fun.
very good. Okay, well, that was exciting. All right, item 11, study session, commissioner liaison reports and interest items, staff reports. So I provided my written comments from the Parks and Community Services, just because and so that is also part of public record. So, gentlemen, liaisons, anything?
I have nothing since our last meeting. The Architecture Review Board is meeting, although they did cancel Thursday's session reviewing the Orchards project. So they've seen it twice, and there's a third and final version of the architecture review is scheduled to be at a new date. So that's what they're working on.
Open
Yeah.
space?
Yeah, I attended the Open Space Advisory Committee meeting on May 12th. We discussed two things. One was the two fall hikes. One was for the Alamo Creek floodplain in September. Would you ever believe we have a floodplain in San Ramon? And the second is in October, they're planning on doing a Cross Valley trail hike to Henry Ranch.
Oh,
Now, maybe while they're up there, they'll figure out where Henry Ranch Park is going to go. But that's what they're going to do. Then the Open Space Committee had a booth at the Art and Wind Festival.
Okay.
which, city council did, I believe, as well, although the city council person came over to my booth. So I was there for 3 hours on Sunday. It's interesting because we actually had a number of people come by and we had various displays for them to indicate what they thought of our trails, where they went on their trails. We had people from Danville, we had people from Dublin come by, Pleasanton, they used our trails. So it was kind of interesting for 3 hours. So we have another meeting, I believe, later this month.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. All right, staff, do we have information for us?
Yeah, just a couple things. Just a point of clarification regarding the Architectural Review Board meeting. There is a meeting scheduled for this Thursday, a special meeting. It's the regular meeting on the 12th that was canceled.
Right, right. Is it Thursday or Friday?
It's Thursday.
Thursday, okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so double check.
I will be there.
Okay, so then with regard to the next meeting, June 17th, we have 2 study sessions. We've had applications filed for a residential project associated with Bishop Ranch 12, which is next to Doris Eaton.
Mm.
And then we've also got a development application filed for Bishop Ranch 8, adjacent to Summerhill. So we're consistent with our policy, we'll get it in front of the Planning Commission within the first 30 days. So that makes it on the 17th. And then we're also working right now to get it posted to the website. So we'll have it up probably within a day or 2. In addition, we will be doing the year in review presentation at that meeting. So we'll kind of recap all the efforts you put in throughout the year. And then we'll have a recognition of outgoing commissioners. Then for July 1st, we will have the swearing in and seating of the new commissioners, election of chair and vice chair. And then there's a couple of additional items that we're working on. We haven't quite finalized, but we're hoping to have a couple of action items for you that night as well.
Other than voting for a chair and a vice chair. Okay.
Yes.
Great. All right. Anything else for the good of the order here? Seeing